Is there a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rozell, seconded by Mr. Popowitz, that we come out of the closed meeting. All in discussion on the motion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion's carried. Mr. Popowitz, do you certify that we only discussed in closed meeting the items that we indicated we were going to go into closed meeting for?
I so certify.
Mr. Thomas?
I so certify.
Mr. Seeley?
I so certify.
Mr. Rozell?
I so certify.
And I certify as well. All right, the next item on the agenda this evening is public comments. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board on any issue at all that's not on the public hearing later in the meeting? If so, please come forward to state your name and your voting district. Hello.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Charles Johnson Sr. I live at 2611 Zion Road, Brewster Glen, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is about some things that may come up in the near future concerning the area in which I live. In dealing with quarries, I would hope that the board, when this does, or if it does, whether it be days, weeks, or months, would consider the people and the residents in that area. Because of past history that we've had with quarries. For us to have to deal with possible 2 quarries is going to be really rough in the area in which I live. I'd appreciate it so very, very much for your time.
Thank you, Reverend Johnson. Appreciate you coming. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on any issue at all that's not covered in a public hearing? I would like to read a letter that has been left for the board in one of these comments during public comment period. To Caroline County Board of Supervisors, I am somewhat familiar with the proposed project that is being considered to go behind Flying J Truck Stop. I've seen the application for zoning and attached documents, and I think you have done a good job to bring a project of this kind to Caroline County. My congratulations. My only concern is, are the profits enough to cover the total cost of this project, or is the county putting up some of the money to cover this project? Sincerely, H. Douglas Hardy. That would be in the public comment section for Mr. Hardy. All right, seeing no further comments, the public comment period is declared closed. And the next item on the agenda is public hearings. And the first public hearing is text -04-2009. Mr. Weber?
Mr. Chairman, Board of Supervisors, good evening.
Is that true?
We could have one hearing, 3 separate votes.
Yes, that's correct, Percy. You can have.
Okay.
You can have.
So we'll have.
One hearing, and 3 separate votes will be required.
Okay.
I bring before you text 04-2009, which is an amendment to add the crematorium to the zoning ordinance as a use permitted by special exception in the B1 business zone. The criteria, real quickly, is to permit only the crematorium as part of the funeral home. The crematoriums must be performed in conjunction with the ceremonies and services provided by the funeral home. The crematorium can be contained in the same building, or it can be contained in a separate building, but it must match the architectural size, design, and scale of the funeral home. If located in a separate structure, it must be on the same parcel as a funeral home, and in all respects must be considered as an accessory to that funeral facility. There were no public comments, no citizen comments at the Planning Commission meetings, and the Planning Commission unanimously voted to forward this to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of approval. Any questions, gentlemen? I'm here.
Board members have any questions of Mr. Weaver? All right, go ahead to the next one.
That basically covers all 3 of them,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, we'll open the public hearing, Mr. Weaver. Let's see what comments are out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now declare the public hearing is open for text amendment 04-2009, text amendment 05-2009, and text 06-2009. You heard the discussion from Mr. Weaver as to what these text amendments would cover. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to these ordinance amendments? Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to these ordinance amendments? One last call. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to or in favor of these ordinance amendments? Hearing no comment, the public hearing is declared closed. Does the board have comments, questions, and how do you wish to handle this issue?
I definitely have some questions of
Okay.
Mr. Weaver.
Okay, Mr. Weaver, if you come back to the podium. Mr. Seeley?
I guess, first of all, will this building be will it be adjoined to the funeral home, or are we forbidding that and saying it has to be a separate building?
No, it can be in the same building as the funeral home, or it can be a separate structure, but it must be on the same site as the funeral home.
Any issue, I mean, fire-wise, is there any issue with it being the same building? Isn't that sort of increased that whole situation of?
Well, no, that would be standard under the building code, Mr. Seeley, as far as the fire ratings for those particular areas.
Has any particular entity made the request for this?
Basically, it comes from the Ladysmith Funeral Home, which is Mr. Hicks's facility located on Route 1.
I guess in that instance, do we know if the smokestack will be visible from Route 1?
Until an actual design was brought before us, Mr. Seeley, we couldn't determine that at that particular stage. As it's now written, it would have to be certain architectural standards that would have to be established.
So if he has to, I mean, do we have any idea how high this stack would have to be for this?
There has been no application brought at this particular time, Mr. Seeley. This was basically taking the Board of Supervisors' recommendation and brought it back to the Planning Commission.
Propane tanks. Do we have any ordinance above or below ground for those for this facility?
Not at this particular stage, Mr. Seeley, no.
Should we be looking at that with a facility like this? And
Well, I guess it's like anything else. As they bring in this type of facility, we will have to investigate the site plan, review the site plan, go through the special exceptions again, and then bring it to the building department for their comments. So it'd be still the same process that we normally would go through. The controls will still be there, Mr. Seeley.
do we need to be more specific in the process of this, I guess is the question.
No, because at this particular time, the only thing you're doing is you're establishing the right of any applicant who owns a funeral home to come in for a crematorium application under a special exception.
But I want to emphasize, anybody that has a funeral home would then be eligible to do this in the county.
That is also correct, sir.
I guess the other question is, will there be a separate crematorium for pets? Are they going to be able to do pets in the same facility?
No, the way this crematorium, the way the description is written, it's for human remains only.
Okay, and I guess my last is, according to some things I read, the Virginia State Board of Funeral Home Directors and Embalmers has actually brought forward some new regulations that require the funeral homes with crematoriums to also have refrigeration storage units that are used prior to cremation. Are we going to require this early on, since we're looking at this before those regulations go forward?
No, sir, we would not look at refrigeration. We would not look at state environmental problems until the actual building was brought before us. At that particular stage, it would have to meet all of the health department requirements as well.
I guess my question is, these regulations are in process now. If this gets done before we get there, they can technically say they're not covered by this. Can we go ahead and change our special exception to require this so that it's covered when it actually happens?
Yes, when the special exception came before you, you could put those requirements in there. Yes, sir, you could.
Can we do it now in an ordinance prior to?
No, we could not do it in an ordinance prior to.
Why?
Because at this particular time, we don't know what part of that ordinance they're actually going to accept, as far as the refrigeration, the amount of time, the amount of refrigeration that would be required. We would be jumping the gun by being able to do something like that.
Have we looked at any other crematoriums? Do we have any idea structurally how high, what they look like, how they present?
No, Mr. Seeley, we have not done a complete investigation of what a specific crematorium would be. If it were a separate structure, it would be different than if they put it inside of a building. If you went by today, I'm trying to think of the one that's in Ashland that has a crematorium in it, you would not know that a crematorium was in that funeral home.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Popowitz?
Not necessarily a question, but well, yeah, it is a question, George. If we wanted to, in the special exception, we could make it so that the building, if it's a separate building, conforms with what is existing on the property as well?
Yes, it actually states it in this application, all right, that it shall be compatible with the architectural style, design, and scale of the funeral home. If it's a separate building, it would have to, if the existing building of the funeral home were a brick structure, it would have to follow the same, and it would have to be the same scale as that funeral home.
Okay, yeah, I missed the design part.
That's
I'm sorry.
right.
All right, thank you for clearing that up.
Other questions of Mr. Weaver? All right. How do we wish to handle the first item, text amendment 04-209?
Mr. Chairman, I go ahead and move that we accept text amendment 04-2009.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made by Mr. Popowitz, seconded by Mr. Rozell. Discussion of the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Ch-
Go ahead, Mr. Seeley.
I guess I just had one statement, and I guess I was a little slow.
Go ahead. Make your statement.
Is
No
this
matter
something we really want to put in Ladysmith? Is this the kind of thing we want to put forward at this point in time with what's going on in Ladysmith now with the other sort of architectural things that are there and the other amenities that we're trying to draw to Ladysmith? Does this really benefit the overall picture and outlook of what was been designed for that whole area? I guess that's the question.
And just in discussion of for the motion is the fact that you find that this process is used more and more and more today, rather than actually being buried in the ground. You're cremated. You see this taking place more and more. I think that just having a crematory in Ladysmith is not going to be detrimental to Ladysmith and how it's going to develop out. I believe and I would trust that Mr. Weaver and the planning department would make sure that the architectural design is keeping in tune and in line with what we are asking for and wanting in Ladysmith. Even without the crematory, I would trust you would do that. And as Mr. Weaver said, my secretary, her husband, passed away a couple of weeks ago. Went to the funeral home. They had a crematory in the funeral home. He was cremated. I didn't realize there was a crematory in the funeral home. And so and that's been in place for a number of years. So just because you have a crematory in the funeral home does not mean it's going to be this odd design and this odd the odd smokestacks and these other things happening. So I don't see that as an issue as long as planning and staff protects the criteria that we have put in place in the Ladysmith area as to how it's to look when it's all said and when it's developed out, as long as you stay to those standards and protect those standards.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as you know, I was part and parcel of the Ladysmith sub-area plan, and I can assure you that the style of architecture will be conducive to what has been planned for Ladysmith. I think what Mr. Seeley is looking at is the Ladysmith Animal Hospital, where there was suddenly this crematory for the animals that was put there. And granted, I was not at that particular time pleased when I first moved in because it stands there as a structure and you can see it. That is not the intention of this, Mr. Seeley, not in any shape, manner, or form.
And I guess the other thing is that this facility is not on county water system. So fire suppression is something else that we have to look at, and that's not even addressed.
Well,
I know we can't do that at this point but we still need to be mindful that it's not, and that is going to be an issue.
We have discussed that with Mr. Hicks. Even today, Kevin Whiteman and myself had a meeting with the Hicks family to discuss fire suppression and how to handle that. There are options, okay, for Mr. Hicks to take, and we've given him all of the options which would meet the state code as required.
Mr. Chairman, could I add one thing?
Surely.
Whether you're in favor or against this, the fact that it would be special exceptions allow us to propose provisions that the board would see fit, as opposed to a normal rezoning where we ask for proffers.
That'd be correct, sir. You
So
can stipulate all conditions
Right.
in a special exception.
So since it's a special exception, we actually have more control than we would have over a normal rezoning.
That is
Which-
also correct.
I'm sure we would exercise under each and every application that comes before us.
That would be correct, and at that particular time, you could demand to see the style of architecture and criticize it accordingly.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
I think the discussion has been said. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
There's been 4 ayes and 1 nay. Steeler votes nay. All right, how do we handle text amendment 05-2009?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we accept text amendment 05-209.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's made by Mr. Popowitz, seconded by Mr. Thomas. You heard the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion is approved, 4-1. Mr. Seeley votes nay. Text amendment 06-2009, how does the board handle that?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept text amendment 06-2009.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Popowitz, seconded by Mr. Rozell, that we approve text amendment 06-2009. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion's approved, 4-1. Mr. Seeley votes nay. All right. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business. I know that, Ms. Thacker, you've been here waiting for this item to come to the agenda. The board is going to defer this motion to the next meeting, which will be December the 1st, next Tuesday evening, which the board has directed staff to draft a letter, or directed the county attorney to draft a letter to you to present to your board, and you certainly can. Mr. Emerson, you may want to talk to Mrs. Thacker tomorrow. Ms. Thacker, you may want to give Mr. Emerson your telephone number so he can call you tomorrow and you all can discuss what the action is going to be. Okay? And we will, then the board will vote on that letter next Tuesday's board meeting. So if you would get with Mrs. Thacker before she leaves, and you may want to just briefly discuss a little bit with her. Mr. Under new business, request to apply for fiscal year 2010 United States Department of Homeland Security SAFER Grant Funds Security Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response for Full-Time Emergency Services Positions. Chief Lehman.
Good evening once again.
Good.
In your package, you should have a request for this particular grant. It's with the Department of Homeland Security for the SAFER grant, the 2010 SAFER grant, which stands for Staffing of Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. One of the goals set forth by the board in next year's fiscal year is to reduce response time and to improve the efficiency of our service. Our resources are being taxed on a daily basis. Just this evening while we were sitting in here, all 3 of the career staff medic units were tied up, and volunteers came in and staffed some additional units. And nighttime, that's fairly easy. In the daytime, it's getting more difficult every day. So I would ask that you consider allowing us to apply for this grant. This would basically, if successful, we would ask for 6 positions. This would allow us to rehire the 4 positions that were frozen in FY '09, and it would also allow us to ask for 2 additional positions. Basically, if we were successful for the first 2 years, all salaries and expenses of the benefits are paid. The 3rd year is when we would pick up the salaries and expenses of those personnel. This is similar to the COPS grant several years ago.
Okay. Questions of Chief Lehman?
Only one.
No, well,
You can have.
all right. Thanks, Mr. Lee. Not necessarily a question, but we're talking in today's dollars. In 3 years, this would represent a penny on the tax rate to keep this going. And Chief, just to make sure, like most of these grants, if we were to accept this grant, at the end of the grant period, we realized we couldn't necessarily afford it, we would have to let these people go. And, I mean, you're aware of that?
If we accept the grant, there's 2 criteria. Under the rehire, if we can qualify for the rehire, under the rehire, there's no stipulation. They pay for the 2-year period,
Right.
and then those individuals could be let go on with no penalties. Under the new positions, however, we do have to retain those positions for a 1-year period for a total of 3 years for the program. After that time frame, those individuals could be laid off.
Okay, and those 2 positions, is it roughly 1/6 of 328? Or is
Yes,
it different?
yes, sir,
So it's like 50,000 apiece?
roughly.
Okay, so we would have to pay $100,000 at a minimum
At a minimum,
if we accept this grant.
yes, sir. And if we can get the others hired under the rehire, which, talking to the grant office today, I think we would stand a good chance of qualifying for that. It fell within the time constraints and the time frame set forth by the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay. Is there, last question. You say the grant doesn't cover equipment costs, which would be absorbed by the existing departments.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any idea what those costs would be?
Turnout gear, uniforms, roughly $3,500 per person.
Per person? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Seeley?
I guess Mr. Thomas hit it. Is there any matching that goes along with this?
No, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Up at the top, no local matching clause.
Mr. Rizzo?
Chief Lehman, obviously, if this was to move forward, we don't know what
You're right.
tomorrow, 3 years from now is going to be like. And have you had any experience with, trying to hire some folks and say, look, in 3 years, we're not sure where your job's going to be? And I guess I'm just trying to think of, are there any other grants, opportunities that you may be able to find between now and 3 years? I mean, do you have see any optimism in that?
Yes, sir. I think there are other grants that we are looking at, and what they don't focus on staffing. We're looking at the Assistance to Firefighter grant coming up at the first of the year, but that's based on equipment. The other grants by the Homeland Security is prevention and safety and things like that. This is the one that basically focuses on staffing. And Mr. Rizzo, I don't know of any others right now that can assist in staffing, other than this one.
Right. But if this, how do you feel about, trying to find folks and you say, look, this is only a 3-year, it's only guaranteed a 3-year deal. Is that something you can work with?
I think we have to. I think this is our cheapest option down the road to assist in trying to provide some daytime staffing and coverage to provide the citizens with the most efficient service that we can.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions I have.
I'm sorry?
That's all the questions I have.
All right. All right. Thank you, Chief Lehman. How does the board, does the board wish to allow the chief to apply for this grant? Is there a motion to such?
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna make the motion to apply for this grant, but I want to kind of frame it in my perspective, in that, like I said before, in 3 years, we don't know if we're going to be able to afford $328,000. But for me personally, if I needed a firefighter or a medic, $328,000 wouldn't be a lot of money. It may take me a long time to pay it off, but I think when you look at what you're going to actually provide to the citizens, like you just said, we're going to put more units on the street. I think most people would say this is probably something that we ought to do. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make the motion that we allow the chief to apply for the SAFER grant funding.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mr. Thomas, seconded by Mr. Popowitz, that we ask the chief to go ahead and apply for the SAFER grant funds. Discussion on the motion. All in favor vote by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. And the motion is carried. Thank you, Chief Lehman. The next item, first reading of proposed animal control-related ordinance amendments to the Code of Caroline County.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the Sheriff's Office has proposed amendments to the county's existing animal control-related ordinances, and there is a revised copy on your desk tonight that we received today that's a little different than what was in your board packet. The proposed changes relate mostly to giving the county the ability to collect revenue for fines, and also recommend some adjustments in fees to make them a little bit more in keeping with our cost to house animals, for example. The Sheriff's Office is here. Samantha, Jesse, I think in particular, put this together and could answer any specific questions the board has. But tonight is simply a first reading to decide whether you're willing to advance the proposed ordinance to public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Pardon.
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
it. Sheriff?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
The packet that's there, and there's a couple of pages that I'll talk about just as we go through it. I think you have the most recent one. That's going to be some of the amendments that will correlate what we have already in our county ordinance as it is for animal control. There are some slight differences in how we're putting it together, and of course I'll get with Mr. Emerson there to make sure that it all meets all the approval of the legalities to it. But in a nutshell, if you would look, we want to add to where it says animal control deputy or other law enforcement officer will be able to enforce the provisions by the county. As you know, when we took over animal control, they're all deputy sheriffs. They all go through the same training as all of our people. So we want the other parts to where it affects our uniform patrol people, not just animal control, to be able to enforce all of the ordinances that you all will adopt for us. The fees will be pretty much self-explanatory, and anything that is directed towards any of the questions, Samantha will be able to handle, as Jesse has done a great job with this. If we look on page 8, there is an amendment for the impound fee and an increase for some of the boarding fees. I think what it was before, it was only like a $4 boarding fee, to where most veterinarians charge as much as $17. You know, we're asking that it be at least $15, and again, it'll be up to the board, whatever fees you wish to put on there, but at least better than the $4 that was there previously. On page 9, there's an amendment to add violation of fees for running at large. Presently, we don't have anything other than, like, I think it was a $5 charge in the old ordinance. Here it's pretty much up to a class 4 misdemeanor, which could get up to as much as $250. And we're looking to see that the first offense, if an animal is running at large, be charged $75 and then go up increments of $50 if they continue to have the animal run at large. If we look on page 11, which is amended of 21-13, I probably should have given you some of those code sections there. If you need it, I can go back. But that's also putting into where we would add a penalty section of a class 4 misdemeanor, which is consistent with animal control. And what a Class 4 misdemeanor is a fine. There is no jail that's attached to any of these with the Class 3 or Class 4 misdemeanors. So if you see those two penalties, there is no jail. Class 1, Class 2 misdemeanors or any felonies do include jail. On page 12, there's an amendment there on 21-14. I think presently there's only like a $2.50 charge for that, to which again we're going up on the actual cost of what it would cost us if we have to put an animal down. And that's pretty much through here. Let's see, on 21-15.1 is the dangerous and vicious dogs, of which I know Mr. Parton and staff has already approved that. It's consistent from what the state is. So that's pretty much the same. If we go to page 16 now, on code section 21-16, there's a phrase in there about section B about omitting. If somebody, what's in the code right now, if they did not pay their license, that we were to kill the dog. So we're taking that completely out. So we haven't done that, by the way. It's just something that Sam and we happen to see, and we felt like that needs to be taken out, so it will be.
I cannot believe Mr. Parton had that in the ordinance, that we'd kill the dog if they didn't pay the license. Come on, guy. Have a heart.
That's kind of harsh, man.
That was before our time.
Yeah, I think that was before Mr. Parton's time.
But he's been the animal control guy for a long time.
He's been the dog
really
man
has.
for a long time.
I'm sorry, Sheriff.
No, we're fine. On page 18, the cruelty to animals section, this 21-25, what we're looking at is this is much more in depth than what we do have in our present code section. I think I know that Samantha had charged somebody under the animal cruelty and it had to go into the state, which meant that it was like $12,000 in restitution that all went to the state rather than to us, because we did not have enough teeth in that, well, no pun intended, but we did not have enough there to follow up with a county code.
Was that the horse case, Sheriff?
Pardon me?
Was that the horse case?
I don't know.
Okay.
No. That's still in litigation, I believe. It's still coming up. And then on page 19, we would like to include care of animals by an owner, and it needs to be added or adopted as an ordinance. And last but not least, on page 20, again, when it deals with restitution, if any charges that are made by the county animal deputy, county animal control deputy, or other law enforcement officer would need to be added in 21-28. We can omit 21-29 and 21-30 as they were the definitions for the cats, which we incorporated at the beginning. And I will leave Mr. Emerson my copy of this to make it a little bit easier to follow. There are some highlighted areas and for y'all to review and to look at. Any specific questions to enforcement, to animal control, I will bring up the expert, Ms. Samantha Jesse. So.
All right. Mr. Thomas, you had some questions?
Just a couple of quick ones, Sheriff, that may not, or Samantha. The page 9, the amendment to add violation fees for running at large, and it speaks specifically to except when engaged in lawful hunting in the open season. What happens, and I see it all the time, and I'm sure a lot of people see it all the time, you've got a dog out hunting, you finish hunting, the dog hasn't come back, and he's just walking down the road looking lost. So when you pick up a dog like that and take him to the animal shelter, the owner has to pay now, or?
When a dog is engaged in lawful hunt, running at large is not something that we would charge. When we pick up those dogs, we call the owners and they can come and pay a board fee with the county. This specifically is referring to when we charge the owner the criminal charge for running at large.
Okay, so somehow you make the judgment call, and I'm not the expert, but I'm sure you make a judgment call when I see a beagle running down Main Street. We're going to assume he was hunting at some point in time, and then you call the owner.
We do speak with the owners and ask them what's going on. A lot of these dogs are hunting, you know, and it is at the officer's discretion as whether they charge or not. If the dog is engaged in lawful hunting, then it is something that we can't charge.
Right.
You know, if that dog's been out for a while and the owner is negligent in some way, it is something that we have charged in the past.
Okay, okay. And the last question is, we're changing some of the fees. Have you come up with an estimated fiscal impact of what these changes would be?
Currently, when we charge this code section, we get a $25 fine.
No, I mean the whole new ordinance, the whole ordinance.
I have not.
Okay, sure.
No, we have not. The fees that we came up with, I know we researched to see what the other localities are doing around us. So they're not just arbitrary and capricious on that. What we should be able to recoup a lot of the monies, like I said, because we haven't been or we've been so far behind, this will help offset our costs too.
Okay, so you're really just trying to break even, and we've been losing money in the past. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Mr. Seeley, you have questions?
Couple questions. Section 21-3, lack of license tags as evidence. You know, the real practice today is to chip dogs. A lot of people who have cherished house pets, that's what happens, is they go in and get them. Do we check for that? Do we have any means for doing that?
We do. The animal shelter has a microchip scanner, as
Okay.
do all the trucks that we have in the county. Each officer has a scanner in the truck.
Okay, because it didn't say anything about that, and sometimes they don't necessarily have collars, but they're chipped and they're pretty easy to find who the owner is based on.
Honestly, our biggest issue with microchipped animals is that the owners aren't registering the chips with the company. So even though we can find that the dog has a microchip, unless they've registered that chip with the company, we have no information to go on other than we know the dog has a microchip.
Okay. Hopefully they're a little smarter than that, but at least I'm just making sure we're looking
Absolutely.
at that point. The other thing I found sort of interesting is that all the license tags, all that stuff is delivered from the treasurer to you guys?
The treasurer's office is the one that's responsible for issuing the tags in our jurisdiction.
Uh-huh.
It's something that we require as animal control, but for somebody to purchase a license, they would need to go to the treasurer's office to do that.
And then you get all those licenses transferred to you?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, it says that all receipts shall be delivered to the animal control deputy for licenses.
Are you looking at 21.4, 21.5?
I'm looking at 21.4. Last sentence, basically, in the copy that I had. Since I haven't had time to look at the copy you guys gave us, I'm sort of going by the copy that I have.
What we've done in the past, the treasurer's office keeps those records. When we need to verify if somebody has a license, instead of them transferring every one to us, we call them and they can check.
That's what I was hoping. I wasn't hoping we were like sending you this pile of stuff that you guys then had to like
No.
decollate, collate, and
They
go
have a
through.
computer system that they keep that information in. It's been very efficient in the past.
Okay, I was just making sure we weren't doing something twice.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Popowich, you have questions?
Yes, I did. Is it possible, going back to the hunting dog situation, is it possible, because you made a comment that kind of disturbed me, if there's a dog that's out, and I know a lot of these guys go out and hunt, I don't see the thrill in hunting with dogs, but I'm not going to condemn it. But one of the things is that some of these guys will lose these dogs and they're looking for them for 3 or 4 days. Is there some way that we could put a policy, or that you'd be willing to put a policy in if these guys call you and say, my dog is lost, this is what it is, that you guys won't charge them with dogs running large?
We recommend to these hunters that when they lose a dog that they call us and file a loss report. That way when we get the report and we go out, we can actually send them out if we know that it's to be their dog, and they can retrieve it. That way we don't have to get involved. If we retrieve it, we can call them. That way the dog's not sitting at the shelter for longer than it needs to. A lot of these guys will come the same day and pick up their dogs, so it's not an inconvenience to the county.
Okay. I had one more. On the microchip, my understanding is that some of the microchips don't work with certain types of equipment.
There are several companies that sell microchips. Avid, Home Again, I believe Bayer put out another microchip. Certain scanners pick up certain chips. Certain scanners pick up all chips. The scanners that we have pick up all the different chips. It'll
Okay.
say which company makes that chip. and the chip number, so that we can call that company and find out who that chip is registered to.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other questions? All right, Sheriff, Matthew, appreciate the information tonight and first reading. So what do you want us to do, Mr. Pardon, as to, besides killing the dogs that don't have license? Do what? No comment. Okay. All right, so we'll have a second reading, and does the board wish to go ahead and public or advertise for public hearing at the second? I'm sorry? January 12th? Okay.
Yep.
Is there a motion to advertise?
Move this forward to public hearing and for us to have to
Second.
All right, the motion been made to authorize staff to advertise for public hearing on January 12th. Is there discussion on the motion made by Mr. Thomas, second by Mr. Popowitz? Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, nay. The motion's carried. Thank you all. Informational calendar items. Mr. Ashcraft.
Mr. Chairman, a couple items that you have annually. First of all, the Essex County Legislative Dinner. You've been invited to attend on January the 7th at 6 o'clock. If you would let myself or Ms. Hall know if you plan to attend that. They need to know a head count sometime by the end of December. The Farm Bureau has also requested a meeting with the board, as they always do, and we've typically chosen a Monday in March. Does that time frame still fit pretty well with the board?
They had run into trouble with butting up against the George Washington Regional Commission meetings. If we can work around that, Ms. Popovich and I would probably appreciate that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, whoever serves next year. Yes. It seems like they were falling on the same
Okay.
Monday.
But Monday looks good in March if we don't conflict with that meeting? Okay.
Yes.
If we can make it the second.
Thank you.
Deacon's meeting. You have Deacon's meeting first Monday?
County government offices will close tomorrow at noon, and they will remain closed until Monday, November 30th, in observance of Thanksgiving. And, but law enforcement and our medical personnel will certainly be working throughout the weekend. And I would remind everyone that the next board meeting is next Monday, December the 1st, and not December, or next Tuesday, I'm sorry, and not December the 8th, as originally scheduled. So, and that is all we have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Closing board comments. Mr. Popowitz?
I have none.
Mr. Thomas?
Actually, I do have one, Mr. Chairman, and it was generated from Chief Lehman's update on the H1N1 virus. And I was in North Carolina a couple of months ago, and they actually did what they called an H1N1 readiness test. And this was the entire state, or at least the State Department of Technology. And they basically selected random employees and said, you've got the flu tomorrow, you go out and work from home or whatever, to see if county government could really function if we were hit by a large flu like that or some sort of catastrophe. I don't know if we can do that in the county, but maybe you could look at it, Mr. Ashcraft, and see if that's something we could try to do.
Yes, sir.
As a, you know, just in case. I'd at least like to try to plan a test rather than have this happen in real life and never have done it before.
As long as Mr.
I
Parton.
said tongue in cheek, I may apply for that myself.
Well, let me tell you what they did. They actually made sure that some of the people had laptops.
Yes, sir.
You know, government laptops, and some didn't, and then they tried to work from their home computer or their, you know, BlackBerry or whatever. You just may want to try it with like 5 or 6 employees and see what happens. Mrs. Hall cannot participate because we won't be able to function without her. So that was.
Okay.
That's it, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Seeley?
No, sir.
Ms. Roselle?
Just to follow up what Mr. Thomas said, I think the county does have a pandemic bird flu policy, which was done a year or two ago. So they could probably, surely,
Trying the same thing.
it's pretty much the same scenario, so that's out there.
All right.
That's all.
We need to go into closed meeting again. Mr. Roselle, would you be so kind?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I moved that the board convene in closed meeting to pursue the personal exemptions of Section 2.23711A1 of Code of Virginia to discuss performance duties and compensation of certain employees of Department of Fire and Rescue matters related thereto. And also, I move we convene board closed meeting, pursue consultation with legal counsel and briefing by staff on exemption Section 2.2-3711A7 Code of Virginia to discuss specific legal matters requiring provisions of legal advice involving the appearance in the regional jail authority and by brief by staff with connection therewith.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made, Mr. Roselle. You heard the motion, and seconded by Mr. Popowitz. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion is carried. The board will enter closed meeting.
All right, Kevin.
I so certify.
I so certify.
I'll make that motion. Aye.
So moved.